All right. Well, hello, everyone, and good afternoon. Welcome to today's session on dashboards. We're going to talk about creating a dashboard in the new PAW environment, Planning Analytics Workspace. So a couple of housekeeping items before we get started. As you can see on the screen, questions that we often get asked: will we be able to get a copy of the slides after the event? And is today's event being recorded for future viewing? The answer to both is yes. So in the event that you wanted to see any of these at a later time, please don't hesitate to contact us. You can contact us at the bottom. You'll see that info@revelwood.com. And on the very last slide, I'll also have my personal contact information. So please don't hesitate to contact us if we have any questions. The goal of today's session for today's presenters, my name is Lee Lazaro. I am the Planning Analytics Practice Leader at Revelwood, and I have been involved in various Planning Analytics implementations over the past few years. I'm also joined today by Nina Gordy, Senior Consultant at Revelwood, who is also one of our lead trainers. And Nina often conducts various sessions in regards to creating dashboards and other aspects associated with Planning Analytics. And she's going to be joining us today. So what we're going to talk about today is we're going to start with a little background about who is Revelwood and why are you listening to us and why are you here? And then we'll jump right into things where I want to talk a little bit about what is PAW. I know that the main goal of today is to talk about dashboards, but for some people who haven't necessarily seen the entire environment, I wanted to give a little bit of a background of the overall PAW environment and some of the great new things that are associated with it. Then we'll get right into the meat and potatoes of today's presentation, where we're going to do a demonstration and we're actually going to create a PAW dashboard together. And once we've created one, we'll take a look at some other things. We'll look at some sample opportunity, some sample databases and dashboards. We'll take a look at and talk through some other things that you want to consider when you're creating the dashboards. And then we'll talk a little bit about some next steps. Let me start by talking a little bit about Revelwood. Revelwood has been doing this for a long, long time. We've been using TM1, we've been implementing, we've been helping to migrate over the course of the PA environment, and we are in the midst of celebrating our 25th year anniversary right now, just to kind of prove that we've been doing this for a long, long time. We have won various awards over the course of our IBM career, everything in regards to being the very first organization in the world to be considered what they call a gold business partner. And some of the awards and some of the things that you see over on the side were situations where we were the very first people ever to win the awards when they came out. We have hundreds of successful implementations worldwide, and we have a large team of certified, experienced, and people who understand your business. All of our consultants are not necessarily just technical people who can code bits and bytes. All of our consultants are also people who understand debits and credits and the business questions that come into play. And recently, I'm proud to say, Revelwood has been selected to a brand new IBM Planning Analytics Advisory Board. And what IBM is looking to do is they're looking to get some of their larger partners together to talk about behind the scenes. How can we continue to evolve? How can we design and define the roadmap together? And there are only a few companies selected throughout the entire world. And again, I'm proud to say that Revelwood was one of those companies. So not only do we have the opportunity to tell you what IBM is thinking, but we have the opportunity to work with you to help IBM make some of that roadmap, those roadmap decisions and design what the planning analytics environment is going to be. So now that we've talked a little bit about the background, let's jump into the tool, PAW. What is PAW? Well, PAW, in a nutshell, it's the new web-based interface for IBM Planning Analytics. And this is where users are going to be able to hop in. As you know, there's two environments in all of the TM1, all of the Planning Analytics world. There's the Excel and the web. PAW is our new web-based interface. But there's a catch. As you guys know, there's always a catch. The catch is that W doesn't mean web. The W in PAW stands for Planning Analytics Workspace. So a lot of people think about PAW as Planning Analytics Web, and it's great to think about that. It's the web interface. But behind the scenes, W really stands for Workspace. Okay. So what is PAW? PAW is our planning and reporting environment. But in addition to the planning and reporting environment, PAW is also our new what I'm calling the developer and the administration environment. So what does that mean? In the old world, and I'm going to say old world means TM1. In the TM1 world, we had two interfaces. We had a web interface and an Excel interface. Your web interface was with a tool called TM1 Web. And TM1 Web was designed to use for all of your reporting and your input. And those of you who work with TM1 Web, you know, really there's two things that you do in the web. Users get in and they pull data, sometimes we call it consume, or users get in and they input data on all your input templates. Everything else, your maintenance, your development, all of your administrative functions, were all done in the Excel environment using a tool called Perspectives. In the new world, I'm going to flip it a full 180. In the new world, the Excel environment, which we now call PAX, although many of you have heard of PAX and you've referenced it, PAX is not officially a name. There's actually another company I learned recently that owns the rights to PAX. So IBM is promoting this with a name that they're legally allowed to use, and they call it Planning Analytics for Excel, PAFE. I've heard some people pronounce it as PAFE, some people pronounce it as PAFE, some people just call it PAFE. But as part of the new branding where PA is coming into play, PAFE, Planning Analytics for Excel, is the new name of the Excel environment. And when I say we're flipping it on a full 180, the Excel environment in the new world is designed just for your reporting and your input templates. So what you used to do in the web side, now is where the Excel side comes into play. Okay? The web, however, now takes over all of those other functionality aspects that used to be in the Excel environment, used to be in what you had for the architect or the behind the scenes perspectives. And this is where we have the reporting, the input, the development, and the administrative. And this is where, again, IBM is rebranding. They're in the process of renaming it. So what we used to know as web is now PASS, Planning Analytics Spreadsheet Services, Planning Analytics Workspace, PAW. So all of the new naming convention is going to be PA something, and there's a few other aspects of it. But really the main takeaway for you to understand on the new PAW environment is we're doing that flip, what I call the 180. Excel is going to be your main end user functionality where you're using it for reporting and input. The web takes all of those and still does all the same pieces, but now it also serves as your development and admin. So what does that mean? Some of the features associated with developer and admin. On the developer side, in the new PA environment, there's a brand new rules editor. As you see on that image, you can see that the formatting is different. For those of you who've been around for a while, you may have remembered that there was this thing called the Advanced Rule Editor. That aspect of the Advanced Rule Editor has been merged into the Planning Analytics environment. You can see that there's colors. You can see that the formatting and the fonts are a little bit different, a little easier to read. For those of you who are VBA programmers, you can see that it looks very similar to that. You can see that when you're looking at lines, the lines are all numbered. On the left side, you can see we're looking at lines 17 to 29. We've also introduced this new aspect called regions. What a region is, if you look very closely at that image, you'll see on line 17, it starts with pound region. Line 29 starts with pound and region. And what you'll also see really close, if you look, is right next to line 17, there's a little triangle. What that triangle is it allows you to group, it allows you to put things into regions so that you can compress and expand. Similar in nature to what you're familiar with in the Excel environment, where you can group rows together and compress and expand them. Your rule editor allows you to do that now, so it makes it a little bit easier to read. Just like there were rule changes, there's also turbo integrator changes in the new PAW environment. Two of the main changes are change number one. In the PAW environment, turbo integrator is much more wizard-based. Back in the old world, Turbo Integrator is a great tool, but it's very notepad oriented. It's just a bunch of text. Now there's much more wizards. So if you look over on the right side, you can see when you're picking your data source, I could just click on one of the boxes. And as I click on a box, if I were to click on Cube, it would bring me to a screen where I can then have a drop down and I could see from radio buttons, let me click on the cube, let me click on the specific view. Brings us in a little bit more wizard oriented. And the other big thing that changes in the Turbo Integrator environment is your scripts are now all based off of a single tab. In your existing perspectives world, it's great in the sense that my prologue was on a different tab than my metadata, which is on a different tab than data and epilogue. And it's great because it allows me to focus with one piece at a time. But the challenge with that is as I need to look at things and as I need to kind of figure out going back and forth of what was in my global area and what then got changed in my data, I had to flip screens. In the new world, the script is all based on a single tab, and it's also made very obvious in regards to where one section ends and where the next section begins. Biggest thing, and this is the piece that you're going to hear throughout the entire presentation and probably throughout every PA presentation that Revelwood gives, is drag and drop. In the old world, in the 1980s, 1990s, the zeros, keyboards were great. Your mouse was great. In today's world, there's a lot more mouse and a lot more touch screen oriented. Whether I'm looking at a touch screen on a monitor, whether I'm doing this off of a tablet, there's a lot more drag and drop functionality. And that's probably the biggest thing that comes into play for every aspect of PA. One thing that comes into play is on the developer side when you're creating, when I'm creating cubes, when I'm creating dimensions, when I want to load data. PA allows us to do drag and drop functionality. You can see over on the right that that's a screenshot of where I'm going to be creating some new dimensions. So I can click on an option that says enter new members, and it'll be similar to what you were aware of before. But I can also click on that center one where I either browse for a file or I could just drag a file right onto that screen. And if I'm dragging a file for a dimension, as long as my dimension was created in some kind of a structural format, Planning Analytics is able to use that to create the dimension for you. If I'm grabbing data and I'm dragging it on top of a cube, as long as I have some kind of delimiter where column 1 is company, column 2 is department, something like that, we can then have a wizard pop up that will allow me to load data. So it's a lot more drag and drop friendly, a lot more user friendly. And on the administrative side, we also have a lot of pieces that come into play in the PA environment. Users and groups. So in addition to the database permission and all the security and the concept of users and groups that you're familiar with in the TM1 world, PAW gives you permissions of what you want to do on your dashboards. This is where you can define another role that comes into play when you're looking at the dashboards. You can see over on the right, I've got a check next to modeler, and that allows me to create dashboards and create input templates. If I was a consumer, it gives me the ability just to look at my reports. And it gives you some extra power and some extra functionality instead of having to go into the TM1 side to figure out database aspects. It also allows you to maintain the server directly in the tool. One of the challenges with the old world is if you want to maintain your server, I want to stop and start the database, I want to take a look at how much RAM I'm using, I want to check out processes that are happening, I have to go somewhere outside of TM1, whether it's Windows, whether it's TM1 Top, whether it's some kind of a component that requires you to not be a TM1 administrator, but become an IT administrator. In the new PA world, all of those aspects come into play directly on your PAW screen. Same with configuration settings. In the current world, you were manually defining a notepad file, which is tm1s.cfg, and you needed to understand what are all these parameters and what are the values, and sometimes you needed to create those if they didn't exist. But in the new world, they're much more wizard-oriented, and it's designed so that not only does it have the options for you. If it's a true-false, I'll have some kind of a drop-down. If there's multiple options, I have some kind of a definition where I could fill it in. And it gives us the ability and it gives us the opportunity to become more of a Planning Analytics administrator instead of a Windows administrator. I just went through a lot of different things in PA, and I know that the main goal is to shift over to the dashboarding, but I wanted to give a little bit of a background, a little bit of an understanding of some of the PA components. And in future webinars, we are absolutely going to go into a deeper dive on a lot of these aspects. But for today, I know we now want to jump into dashboards and reports. And what a Planning Analytics dashboard and report allows us to do is this allows us to create books and sheets by, wait for it, I promised it was coming, drag and drop. There's going to be a lot of drag and drop functionality. And when Nina goes into one of her demonstrations later, she's going to show you how we can do dragging and dropping, how we can create things, how we can resize things, how we can move things. Okay? Just like you're able to do in your Excel environment and therefore your TM1 web environment, you're allowed to create books and sheets that have content from different cubes. I can have data from cube A, I can have data from cube B, and I can have them as independent pieces on my dashboard, or I can move them together. I can also easily create buttons. Similar in nature to what you know about action buttons, we're able to create web-based buttons, but we're able to take it a few steps further. So you'll still be able to have your navigation where I can go from one piece to another. You'll still be able to run TI processes, but it's going to be much more user-friendly. There's going to be wizards, and there's going to be drop-downs, and there's going to be different variables that I'll be able to utilize within my TI processes. But because it's web-based now, it's going to be real easy for you to create those links. One of the questions I get asked on almost every client when we're implementing something associated with the web is, can I just link this to my existing intranet? And in the PA world, the answer is 100% yes, and it's much easier. Because of the fact that it's a web page, it's easy for you to create internal and external links. And Nina's going to demonstrate that in a little bit. We're also able to create visualizations very, very easily in the Planning Analytics environment. In the TM1 web world, we have the ability to create an Excel spreadsheet and pull data. And then we have the ability to use Excel graphs. And those graphs will oftentimes flow into your TM1 web reports. But one of the challenges is that when I'm creating those visualizations, I need to know how to do it. And for those of you who know how to create Excel graphs and Excel charts, it's second nature. But for those of you who don't, it's yet another thing to learn just to create a basic report. In the Planning Analytics world, it's going to be very easy for you to just click on a button and switch a view from one to the other, which also segues into the benefit number 2. As an end user, I have the ability to switch my visualizations at any point in time. In the TM1 web world, when I create a chart, if I created a chart and determined that I want it to be a bar chart, well, when I create that, that's my way of kind of putting my fist together and slamming it into my hand and saying, everybody, that's what you're going to use. You're going to use a bar chart going left and right. But if I'm the kind of person who wants to see things going up and down in the Planning Analytics world, as an end user, that bar chart became my starting point, and I could simply click on a button to easily flip it to a columnar chart. And there's going to be a lot of different visualizations that you'll see some of them in the demonstration, and I'll talk a little bit more about those at the end of the presentation. Dashboards and reports also allow you to change some of the terminology. Excel is a numeric system. It's a spreadsheet. It gives me the ability to do everything based on numbers. Planning Analytics allows you to merge words into the equation. So for those of you who may have seen some of the tips and tricks and some of the videos that we've done previously, you know that when I'm entering data, if I want to put 20,000, I could just type 20K. Or if I want to go into a cell and I want to add 1 million, I could just type add 1M into it. But in addition, I can manipulate my views. I have a functionality called snap commands, which will allow me to use English language to simply make changes to my view. Maybe I'm looking at a grid and I could see left to right all 12 of my months, and I want to focus just on June. I could just type keep June, and what it will do is that will manipulate your view for you. Instead of having to go into subset editor and do selectors and a bunch of clicks, you just say keep view. And I purposely just said I could say, because as you evolve through the use of this, as you start plugging in microphones into your laptop and using your tablet and various other aspects of connecting into the internet, you don't necessarily even need your keyboard. I could click on my microphone button and just say the words, keep June. And by having my microphone combined with these snap commands allows me to just talk to the computer and let Planning Analytics manipulate the data that I'm looking at. And even though there's all this new functionality, one of the questions I get asked a lot are web sheets. Planning Analytics Worksheets will allow you to use your existing web sheets. Much of the work that Revelwood does is to use the existing web sheets as we evolve, as we build some of the aspects into our model. You've spent a long time creating web sheets. Some of you have done this over the course of years. Some of the people on the call may have even done this over the course of decades. You don't want to lose all the web sheets that you've created. Paul realizes that, and it allows you to take a web sheet and create a Paul book with it. Again, just by drag and drop. I can drag and drop a web sheet into a book and merge it in conjunction with Paul dashboards. So what we're going to do now is like I said before, I wanted to give a bit of an overview and talk through some of the major aspects of Paul, and specifically about the books and the dashboarding. And what we're going to do now is we're actually going to create a dashboard together. And what we're going to do is we're going to create something that's going to look similar in nature to what we have on the screen. We're going to create a dashboard that's going to have a grid down on the bottom. And that grid is going to have numbers, and it's going to have the ability to expand and contract, and it's going to have a title on it, or I could say units by month. It's also going to have a chart associated with it where we'll be able to look at another set of data and look at revenue. At the very top, we're going to have selectors, or what we often knew as picks prior to this, where we'll be able to create a selector very easily through, again, I'm going to keep saying it, drag and drop functionality, and we're going to synchronize it so that as I change the year, both sets of data are going to change. And we're also going to create a link to a web page. So we'll create a link directly to the Revelwood web page, and you're going to see how easy it is to create a dashboard using some of your Planning Analytics data. So with that being said, I'm going to stop my share. I'm going to turn it over to Nina, and Nina is going to demonstrate how to create a dashboard.
Perfect. Thanks, Lee. Okay. So before we dive into actually creating the dashboard itself, I just want to point out that, this is what you'll see when you initially log into PAW. So right now I'm signed in as the admin, so I'm actually seeing a few extra pieces, namely the administration console in the upper right-hand corner. But essentially, whenever you log in, you're going to see the shared folder. So as your team starts creating books or views and saving them up to the server itself, they'll all appear here. And then you then have the ability, to filter and search to quickly find the ones that you need. But for the purposes of this demonstration, I'm going to be working as a modeler. Okay. So to add a new book, the first thing you're going to do is click the new button. By selecting the option on the left, it'll automatically open what's called a tabbed book. So this is going to be similar to Excel, a book that has the ability to add multiple sheets. However, if we select the book from template, we actually have the ability to customize how the book is going to appear. So whether we do want it tabbed or as a single page, in this case, we're going to create a single page dashboard. We can name our book right from the get-go. So I'll just call it dashboard. And finally, you have the option to select your layout. So the main difference here between a freeform or a preset layout is how you want to arrange your objects or your widgets on the dashboard itself. So if you're coming into this and you really don't have a plan, you kind of want to see where it goes, then I would definitely recommend the freeform. As well as if you think that you're going to be creating, say, an 18-month forecast where it's going to be really quite a few columns and it's going to go over the edge of the screen, I would definitely recommend using this freeform option. The benefit to the templates, however, is that they're specifically designed to size according to your screen. So it's going to ensure that whatever dashboard you create will fit your screen, whether it's on your own personal laptop or you end up sharing it on another monitor later on. So like I said, for today's example, we're just going to work with a freeform. I can click create. So this is going to take us to the actual workspace development interface. So creating our dashboard is as easy as navigating through the task pane on the left-hand side. As Lee mentioned, we have the ability to drag and drop our views out onto the workspace to get started. I'm going to start with my exploration. I just want to point out that you can either drag and drop, or there's also the right-click functionality. So a lot of the time, you have the ability to do various tasks through the right-click menu or the drag and drop. So I've created this view, this exploration, and I think I'm just going to place this on the bottom for now. I can resize later on as soon as I add my widgets. You may have noticed that the dashed line appears as I start to drag and drop and really resize my object. And this really comes in handy actually when you start adding multiple widgets or objects onto the dashboard, because it's really easy to nicely lay things out. You don't have to worry so much about whether it's centered or not. Paul will help you out with that. So a couple more things I'm going to do with this exploration before I move on. I'm first going to synchronize it to the sheet. And what this is going to do, as we mentioned, is it's going to allow me to make a selection on the selector or even on another widget or object, and whatever changes I make for the dimensions that I synchronize, it will impact the other visualizations that I've dragged out or that I've created. So for this example, we're going to synchronize the year dimension. So one thing I want to point out actually about this properties window up at the top right is that as I'm working with different objects, the properties actually change. So you may see a couple of options here at the moment, but later on they change, and that's just to accommodate the various objects that you can work with in a PAW dashboard. So really the next thing I'm going to do here is just hide this overview, and I can leave that there for now. So finally, the last thing I'm going to do with the navigation pane is just drag out this other view that I've created, which I'm actually going to turn into a different type of visualization. So since I'm done navigating, I can hide that and give myself a little bit more real estate. Space this out to make it look a little nicer. There we go, perfect. Okay, so for this exploration, I actually don't want to keep it as an exploration. I want to turn it into some other kind of visualization. So for this one, we are going to select the line graph. So what's really great about the visualizations in PAW is that PAW is smart enough to know, based on the view you've created and the data that it sees, these are the visualizations that are available to you. So you don't have to worry about, well, what really can I do? It's all there for you. It's all laid out. So once again, I'm actually going to synchronize this one to the sheet. For this example, we're really just working with the year dimension. And as soon as I click out, anything that I've done in the properties window is automatically saved. Okay. Now, before I hide the overview on this widget, this visualization, I want to create my selector object. And as we mentioned, lots of drag and drop capability here. So for this one, we are going to just drag and drop the year dimension out. And now we have our selector object. So I can go ahead and hide the overview and move my visualization over. Perfect. So I'll find that center line. So it's that easy to really, create your objects, place them where you need them to go, and create a selector that actually, makes it a lot easier for the user to see multiple variations of the data. So if you see now, when I pick a new year, both the line graph and the exploration at the bottom are going to adjust because I've synchronized the year throughout my sheet, throughout my dashboard. Okay. So before I move on to the last item I'm going to add over here, I just want to add a couple of titles to my objects. Makes it a bit easier to understand what's going on. So using this option here, I can add a title to the line graph and to the exploration as well. Perfect. Okay. So like I said, the last thing we're going to do here is just to add a link to an external web page. So all of these buttons at the top allow you to add objects or widgets onto the dashboard. We're going to be using this guy right here, which is the web page. So as soon as I click that, I get the web page widget on my screen. And I can size this as needed. And the last thing I'm going to do is just enter the URL. So if I were to type, I think Lee mentioned that we're going to link it to our website. We're going to link it to revelwood.com. If I were to just type revelwood.com, I get a nice warning message, which actually lets me know that, I have to be using an HTTPS link. So a couple good things here. It's going to give you a detailed error message, telling you what you did wrong. The other thing that's kind of great is that it does require HTTPS. So, it's going to be a little bit more secure. So I can go ahead and add that to my URL. Perfect. So you may notice that the web page right now looks a little bit grayed. I can't actually interact with it. And that's because I'm still in edit mode. So as soon as I get out of edit mode, I'm going to be able to work with this page as if I had just opened, a new tab in my browser and navigated to revelwood.com. So I'm pretty happy with the way this looks now. I think it's all set, and I want to test it out as if I were an end user. So all I need to do then is to get out of edit mode, using this button in the upper left-hand corner. And what I can see here is the finished product. So we have our dashboard with the year selector. I can update the year, and this will impact both the line graph visualization as well as the exploration at the bottom of the screen. And finally, I have my web page link at the upper right-hand corner that is live, linked to revelwood.com. And with that, I think we've got our dashboard.
Excellent. All right. Excellent. And let me share my screen back again. Okay. And as promised, what we created in a mere 10 or 15 minutes looks exactly or similar in nature to what you see on the screen. And that kind of gives you a little bit of an understanding of how fast it is, how easy it is to create the dashboard. Now, I just said Nina did it in about 15 minutes, but that's because a lot of it was teaching and explanation. What you saw is once we had a couple of predefined views, we just dragged the two views on the screen, clicked on a single button to synchronize, and then we also clicked on a single button to create a web page. As you get more and more comfortable with this, you're going to be able to create dashboards, and more importantly, your end users are going to be able to create their dashboards in just a couple of minutes. For those situations where you don't have a pre-existing view, the approach of creating a view is similar in nature to what your users already know through views in Server Explorer. The concept of dragging and dropping, the concept of rows, columns, and titles, the concept of subset editor, it's the exact same thing that your users already knew. So if you didn't have a predefined starting point, we have the ability to create something on the fly, again, over the course of seconds, maybe minutes. So now that we've seen a dashboard that we had for this demonstration, what I wanted to do is I thought that maybe we take a look at a couple of other sample dashboards and talk a little bit more about, take a step back from the how do we create that technically and start thinking about it, how do we create it business-wise? Okay. So the first sample dashboard that I want to take a look at here, what you can see in the image is you can see that this is an example of what I often call a CEO portal or some kind of a dashboard where it shows you information. It's not drillable. It's not user interactive. And what this dashboard shows you is it shows data from multiple cubes, just like we talked about before that Perspectives offers it. The way that we have our model set up is we purposely have our revenue and our units in two different models, two different cubes. And you can see that on the top, we have our revenues. On the bottom, we have units through two different cubes. You can see that there's multiple visualizations. I'm always a big fan of showing numbers. I'm always a big fan of the grid because it gives you the details behind it, but I'm also a big fan of the pictures. And you can see that there's a lot of different approaches with the pictures. We've got line charts and bar charts. We've got word. We've got the aspect of geography where I could see things popping out. If you look really, really closely, you're going to see that we also introduced some background shading. When Nina created her dashboard, she purposely kept everything white, and it made it appear as if it was one big flow. In this particular sample, we put a bit of a different shading. It's a really light gray, and it almost makes things pop out a little bit more. We also created links for navigation purposes. We're up at the top right. You can see that there's that yellow box that says reporting portal. Well, that's actually a link to another page. So your end users know, click on this, I'm going to go somewhere else. And the biggest thing, we've just talked about 4 different things that it has, but the biggest thing is that it's missing something. This example is purposely missing selectors. This is an example of a situation where we have a lot of clients where we have somebody in the organization who says, I just want to go in, I want to see a high level overview of my company, and then I want to get out. This is an example of that. There's no selectors. It's designed to show me the high level overview of something so that if I did want to dig into details, I can go into the reporting portal. Now, for those people who do want to see a little bit more detail, here's another example of something where a dashboard could look like. In this particular example, we purposely have selectors, and we have multiple selectors. We have one selector for the time period, another selector for the specific item. And as you change each of those values, all of the data associated with it, your charts, your numbers, your various things will change. This also has something that Planning Analytics offers with what I call pop-out numbers. Those two numbers at the top right corner. You could see that if I were to dig into the grid, my very first number is 3,600 units, and that pop-out shows me that I have 3,600 units, but it shows it in an abbreviated format, 3.6K. You can see that the data down on the bottom doesn't list my revenue, but we can create another pop-out where it's going to show me, here's my units, which I could have seen more detail below, or here's my revenue, which I don't have. And the approach used at the bottom right is we purposely chose a simple color scheme for that one. The top is great because a lot of clients like to use that phrase with me, the wow factor. They like to have something pop out. They like to see a lot of colors, and they like to see a lot of variety with it. But many organizations want the exact opposite. The example down on the bottom right purposely uses a blue color scheme. So all of the colors in the bar chart are blue. All of the values or all of the heat map associated with the geography is some form of shade of blue. All the text over to the right is blue. What does this show you? Yeah, it shows you a couple of samples, but it also shows you the variety that we're going to be able to do in the Planning Analytics environment, where you're able to create PAW dashboards using whatever scheme makes sense to you for the applicable piece. Okay. So what does that mean for the applicable piece? There's some things that you're going to want to think about. There's some things that you're going to want to consider when you're creating these PAW books. Okay. So the first thing you want to think about is that as user experience. Okay. We just saw two examples where very different. One of them had a lot of colors, one of them had a single scheme. One of them had various selectors, one of them didn't. One of them had navigation, one of them didn't. And this is where you want to think about, what do you want for your user experience? You know, what kind of navigation do you want? What kinds of logos and fonts and things like that? And really what your goal is you want a good user. You want a good user experience. Okay? You want your users to intuitively know what to do. Yeah. Where am I going to go for my inputs? Where am I going to go for my outputs? When I'm looking at my outputs, where am I going to go for my summary data? Where am I going to go for my details? Okay. This comes into play with a combination of pictures and words. Words can offer some instructions. Words can make things happen, but consistency when you're using things like pictures and when you're looking at navigation and home pages and things like that, you want to think through your user experience. You also want to think about the styles that you use. When Nina first started, you saw that there was a button that said click on new. And there were two decisions you could make. The first decision, do you want a free form or do you want to use one of the templates? Well, as Nina said, templates are great because the way I look at templates is it's kind of like Shutterfly. When I'm creating a card or I'm creating some kind of collage or something like that, it's great because I could drag pictures in, and I have no artistic talent. I'm not going to pretend to. The fact that there were some pre-built templates on Shutterfly make my pictures look nice. Well, that same concept may come into play when you're creating some of your dashboards, and using those templates gives you the ability when the layout suits your needs. So if you have some kind of a template, and IBM is constantly changing and increasing the number of templates that are out there, but when that layout suits your needs, templates are great. And also, like Nina said, when you want to ensure that everything fits onto a single screen, if you know that some of your users are looking at a monitor, some of your users are looking at a tablet, some of your users are potentially looking at a phone. I actually was talking to a client the other day who set up their monitor as a 42-inch TV. Well, by the time I looked at it, it was very hard to see because they're used to looking at it at the 42-inch TV. I had to pull out my binoculars just to be able to see it on my screen. Something like a template is great because it will manipulate the size. It will purposely adjust it into your screen size. Okay? But you may also have the exact opposite. You may have situations where you purposely don't want it to adjust. Nina used an example with maybe I have a a long-term plan and I'm looking at a lot of columns. Many of our clients have gone down the path of looking at 18 or 36 months. We even have one client who does a 5-year plan. Well, if I had 60 different columns, I don't want the system to adjust my screen size. I don't want to have to pull out the binoculars just to look at my screen. So in that particular case, freeform might be better. There's no right and wrong answer. The proper answer is depends on the situation. And that also comes into play for the second piece. Do I want tabbed or do I want a single pane? Meaning, if I were looking at an Excel workbook, do I want a workbook with a bunch of sheets or do I want a single workbook? Okay. The way I like to think about that one is think of your data. If I have completely different sets of data or completely different security aspects that come into play, I'm a big fan of setting them up in different books. So if I know that I'm going to have an operating expense set of data, and then maybe on another input, I'm planning my compensation. Well, not only is it a completely different set of data, but I promise you that the security is going to be different. And in that particular case, I recommend creating different books. But if you know that you're going to have the same set of data, maybe just pivoting it or looking at it a little bit different. Or maybe I want to be able to do my compensation values where I'm putting in dollars on one aspect and then I'm putting in headcount and I'm doing a driver and then I want to see some results. Well, that's a good situation where there's a bunch of different data. I want to think about it a little differently because I want to think about my headcount different than the way I think about my results. But that makes more sense where I'm having one book with a bunch of different tabs. You also want to think through your visualizations. So I had talked about it, Nina had talked about it, and the fact that there's a whole bunch of great visualizations, and IBM is smart enough to look at your data and figure out what kinds of visualizations do you want. But it's also really easy to get carried away. Now, the visualizations are great because you've got the whole concept of a picture says 1,000 words. And for those of you who know me, it's 10,000 words because I talk and talk and talk a lot. But visualizations are great because it shows you a story. It tells you something. You could see trends. But think about your visualizations because each one of these styles has its own purpose. Parts as a whole. That's where you're looking at pie charts. That's where you're looking at what they call tree maps. And for those of you who don't know what tree map is, that's one of the images where it's a giant rectangle, and then they show you pieces of the rectangle in different sizes. So maybe I see the rectangle broken into 2, 3, 4 different parts, and each one is a little bit bigger in comparison to each other. The parts as a whole is great when I want to look at how does this particular piece come into play for the entire organization or the entire something. Trends over time. This is where you're looking at line charts and area charts. Trends over time are great when you're trying to see how am I doing overall? Am I on an upward swing? Am I on a downward swing? Do I have some kind of seasonality where maybe I could see some kind of a curve going into play? And that's where these line charts will come into play. Comparisons. This is where you're going to have your bars and columns. This is where you might have your geographic maps. This is where I want to be able to look at Department A versus Department B, or Product A versus Product B. All of these visualizations have a purpose, and the thing to think about is, what story are you trying to tell? And you also want to think about how are you telling that story. Think of the layout on your screen. The great thing about this, when I joke about that person with the 40+ inch monitor, is there's a lot of real estate. But you want to think about what's there. Not only do you want to not put too much on there, but you want to think about how users are going to consume that data. And most people read in a Z pattern. So really what they do is they start at the top left corner, they look at that first, they go across your top row, and then they work their way down to the bottom and they work it out for the Z pattern. And that's a good way to think about how do you create your dashboards. Typically, the recommendation that we make is when you're creating a dashboard, take your most important piece. Think about what story you're trying to tell. Think about what question you're trying to answer. And that's your main focus on this particular sheet. Put that in your top left corner. Then, if you know that there's something that flows next, maybe my top left corner was some kind of a summary and I want to dig into the details. Or maybe now I am looking into aspect A, which flows into B. I'm looking at units at the top left, and now I want to figure out how does that impact my dollars for my revenue. That's the approach that I would use on your top row. Let's assume we have 4 quadrants or 4 corners in it. Your top left corner is what's the main answer that you're trying to convey in this particular sheet. Top right corner is what is something associated with that adds a little bit more value. Then you go work your way down the Z pattern, your bottom left corner. That's where we could say, now I want to answer a secondary. Oftentimes it has to do with that top left corner. Oftentimes it's something completely new. But this gives us the opportunity to now pop our third quadrant in there, which then gives us our closing at the bottom right. And that closing allows us to say, okay, what are we going to do next? Are we getting a little bit more details? Are we asking another question? Are we maybe then showing that grid where I said I always like to see the numbers? Think about the layout and think about what your users are going to do. Your ultimate goal is just to make it faster and easier for your users to understand the data. You want them to look at something. You want them to be able to answer their question. You want them to be able to not get too confused at what's going on the page. And then you want to be able to dig into it. I know everybody's got their own expression that they use, but my expression when it comes to creating these dashboards, which also comes into play on a lot of them, is the 2-second rule. If it takes me more than 2 seconds to try to figure out what's on the screen, then that's time that I'm taking away of actually looking at the data and analyzing it on the screen. Figure out what's a good balance of what do you want on your screen, how can you keep the user with the legitimate flow, and be able to make them easily answer the question of why they came into that in the first place. So we just went through a lot of different aspects associated with Planning Analytics. We talked at a very high level on some of the new functionality with the administrative side. We talked and showed a little bit about creating PAW dashboards, and then we also talked about some recommendations on how to create those. If you have any further questions, and whether it's other users that you want to see some of the aspects, or whether you want to learn a little bit more on some of the deep dive, Revelwood offers training curriculums throughout the entire Planning Analytics environment. We offer training courses on PAW specifically, where we're able to create some dashboards with you, and we'll be able to use your data to actually create some PAW books and PAW navigation. We offer training classes on the Excel side, where we're able to talk about a little bit of the difference between your perspectives and your PACS environment and some of the new features and functionality. For those of you who've never been involved with the administration side or want to learn a little bit more about development, we offer PA versions of those aspects. So please absolutely contact us if there's anything that we can do to help enhance some of your knowledge. And if it's something that we want to do as a formal class, we offer those. But if it's something where you just want to be able to learn some pieces of it, Revelwood also has a knowledge center on their website. And we have additional detail on many of these topics. Every week, we post a new tips and trick. Sometimes it's going to be words, sometimes it's going to be pictures, sometimes it's going to be videos. But every one of these pieces on the Knowledge Center is purposely designed to be some kind of a quick hit tips and trick about the tool. Now, it's not limited to technical items. Sometimes we talk about Excel, sometimes we talk about Windows, sometimes we talk about business concepts of how to think about it. But a majority of what we do on the Knowledge Center is purposely designed to focus on PACS and PAW. So please absolutely come to our website, take a look at the Knowledge Center, and you can subscribe to it where we can send those to you every week. I want to thank everybody for your time today. I appreciate you joining us and absolutely appreciate the fact that you were able to see us create a dashboard. If you have any other questions associated with PAW or anything else associated with Planning Analytics, please don't hesitate to contact me. You can contact me directly at the information down at the bottom right corner, or you can visit our website at www.revelwood.com. Thanks a lot and have a great day, everyone.